Wake up. You've been in a coma for 3 days.
Wait, what?
Don't freak out. I'm only joking.
Oh, that's good, because
You've actually been in a coma for 3 weeks.
I'm probably going to regret asking this, but do you have any idea why I was in a coma for 3 weeks?
It doesn't make sense. What would the president of Appleday want with you?
You mean to tell me that what I watched wasn't a fever dream?
Well, I wouldn't say that exactly.
Get out of my way.
Just what do you think you're doing?
I'm gonna finish this fight. Okay, where was I? No, do not remind me. Okay, because these kids can't put 2 and 2 together, Jimmy decides to follow Sonny to work and figure out what he's up to, with the old cartoon moving bush technique. Actually, this here would be a funny joke if the entire movie hadn't put me in the worst mood possible. We follow this bush following Sonny to work, and we're led to believe that it's Jimmy, but nope, Jimmy was just waiting by the gate, and the bush was unrelated. It's actually a clever misdirection. The only thing it's guilty of is being in Reanimated, where every other joke is a black hole of comedy, sucking the funny out of everything around it. Speaking of that, this next scene. Jimmy tracks Sonny down to a meeting of the Appleday Company executives.
Wondering why I called you here today.
Actually, Sonny, it was us that called you here today.
Well, you say tomato, I say how high.
Yeah, pretty much everything in this scene is going to be on that level of comedy. Except for Tom Kenny, who has a cameo here,
Sonny, you said he moved away for a life at sea.
and he is awesome.
This company's in the toilet. Speaking of which, I will be right back.
Dude, you're the professional, and professionals know that they should go before the meeting. This is probably the guy who greenlit this movie. Now, get this. When Jimmy breaks into the meeting because, professional studios don't have any kind of security whatsoever, it's revealed that the company wasn't keeping tabs on the kid that they gave the brain of their founders to. They just took Sonny at his word, even though they didn't trust him to know about the brain for 30 years. Okay, for a bit of a recap, for the people who missed the first part of this review, I said that this movie was at least attempting to be a homage to cartoons created by people who didn't understand cartoons. With this scene, I'm beginning to see and believe a more disrespectful interpretation of this movie. I think it was made by people who viscerally hated cartoons. Going through the list, they made their ex be of the most famous cartoonist in the world, someone who detested his only child, and died from eating paint, despite calling himself the greatest man who ever lived. Because they didn't want to do any research because cartoons are fucking stupid, let's just make every single cartoon made by just this one guy. Not just Mickey Mouse, but Tom and Jerry and Transformers, because he could totally make that after his death. And then they make the XP of the most famous cartoon character in the world an egotistical, manipulative asshole. And on top of that, they expect us to deal with this insufferable plot because cartoons be stupid! People do lots of stupid stuff in cartoons! And you know what? Sure. People do lots of stupid stuff in cartoons. Cartoons do have a lot of stupid humor. But there's actually an art to it. It takes a lot of effort to pull something off like SpongeBob. And if you want a good example of that, well, look at SpongeBob. In that show, the gap between good episodes and the bad episodes are wider than the Grand Canyon. Because you can't just throw nonsense at the audience, even an audience of very young kids. They need some kind of consistency. And you need to be able to respect your audience. And on the topic of respect, they hired Jimmy without even asking him.
Wait, but if Jimmy's here, and he has Milt's brain, then Milt's bad!
Sonny, you're out. Jimmy, you're in. Congratulations, you're the new president of Appleday Pictures.
What?
That's right. You're going to use Milt's brain to turn this company around.
So, to sum up this movie, it's Jimmy getting pushed around by his Craig, then he gets pushed around by the executives, then he gets pushed around by the cartoon characters in his head. Ignoring the story and morality problems or whatever, it just gets so fucking repetitive. It's the same thing, again and again and again. That's all this movie is for an hour. It's an hour and a half of just waiting for Jimmy to stand up for himself while every character in this movie proves to be absolutely awful. The first thing that these executives do in the film is awful. And it makes me hate all of them, except for Tom Kenny. He is awesome. Although he does need to be more selective with the projects that he works in. Between this and Elf bullying the movie, it makes me kind of concerned to how he picks his projects. Of course, Golly is excited, and oh god, this animation. Actually, I don't even want to call it animation. While Golly occasionally changes poses, it's clear that they're just sliding a picture of Golly across the screen, which can be easily done in most editing programs. In fact, I think YouTube personalities were doing the exact same thing in 2006. And when Jimmy is holding Golly, even to something who knows nothing about animation, it looks weird and awkward. This is because Golly's weight and build is incredibly inconsistent, and Jimmy is not moving in tandem with how Golly is moving. Yes, I get that they're just hallucinations living inside Jimmy's head, but if they're real to him, they need some kind of consistency. The next day, Sonny shows Jimmy his new office.
Ta-da!
Oh my god. When you use that trumpet sound effect, you're supposed to use it when the amazing thing is revealed to the audience. It works like it's supposed to if you played that when we got to see how big Jimmy's office really is.
Ta-da!
See, it's not that hard. Who did you get to edit this film? Because this is so basic that someone who has never edited anything before could tell you exactly what you did wrong. So, then Sonny tries to kill Jimmy. You know, most movies where a grown man tries to kill a child don't really tend to bill themselves as comedies. But no, I guess the prospect of this kid getting crushed to death means that someone somewhere is laughing. Once again, yes, cartoons can get sadistic as fuck, but cartoons can easily bounce back from even the most dangerous and deadly of pains. Getting blown up by dynamite, falling off cliffs, getting run over by a steamroller. But here, we're following real-life people, which pushes the suspension of disbelief so much further. Our frame of reference is that real-life people get killed from these things. Even in something like Home Alone, there is the understanding that the kid could actually get hurt by these guys. The comedy doesn't come from, oh, Kevin almost just died. The comedy comes from the burglars getting the punishment, because they deserve it. When Jimmy's desk gets crushed, the only joke is, Jimmy almost just died, which is not funny in the slightest. While cartoonish things happen in this movie, we've never actually seen a character go through some proper hardcore slapstick. You know, except for the fucking train, which, you know, put Jimmy in the hospital, which required a desperate surgery to save his life. They haven't established that it's a world where Jimmy could survive getting, I don't know, electrocuted. And it makes you more uncomfortable than willing to laugh.
Honey, I need to go back to work. Can you watch the boys for a few days?
Why do I have to? Why can't Dad?
That's my husband! I know they said I couldn't bring mental patients home, but when I looked into his puppy dog eyes, I just couldn't resist. I had to kidnap him right there and then. Right after he tried to poison me the 5th time, we got married. Because you can't resist those little quirks. No, honey, for the last time, toasters are not bath toys.
We got more important things to fix, like my shattered reputation. And we can start by making a new cartoon, starring me!
You know, I'm beginning to think that Golly was based on that one guy at Cartoon Network at the time who thought that Seeing Real was a bad idea, and so they decided to put him in the movie and make him an asshole. They come up with the idea of starting up a show again called The Marvelous Mind of Milt.
You've been working hard, kid. I thought you could relax in this luxurious massage chair. It just needs a moment to warm up. So, how are things going? With work that you're doing, and not me, which I'm fine with.
So the joke here is that the creepy old guy wants to get the brain of a 14-year-old, and so he tries to murder him repeatedly. It's funny though, because they stand around and talk nonchalantly while the electric chair warms up. This is worse than the Crusher joke. Thinking of someone Jimmy's age being basically electrocuted to death is quite disturbing. Once again, if you want to take a look at a live-action movie that made getting electrocuted to death funny, look at Groundhog Day. It worked in Groundhog Day because when Bill Murray repeatedly tried to kill himself, he would just come back to life the next day, and we knew that's exactly what would happen. The implication here is that this will indeed kill Jimmy. Also, after Sonny nearly crushes Jimmy, and immediately after Sonny tries to electrocute Jimmy, Jimmy lets Sonny fix the train needed for the show. Why does nothing in this movie make any sort of sense? These pieces do not fit together! It's not that the characters are making bad decisions, it's that the characters aren't making any decisions. Things just happen, and characters like Jimmy blindly accept them without so much as an acknowledgement. There aren't even any jokes. It's just that these characters are designed to accept anything that happens to them, which is bad writing. And no, having a character just accept something that's fucking stupid is not funny. Then we have this scene. This scene is a microcosm of how fucking obnoxious this movie can be. This scene of the secretary just walking down the office takes 20 seconds. It is one of the most baffling scenes in movie history. I would call it a joke, but it would probably take me a lifetime to understand where the humor is supposedly coming from. My first guess is that the joke is the size of the office, but that's not funny. Look at Jimmy! Even he doesn't know how this is supposed to be funny, and he's fucking in the movie! What makes this even more tedious, once again, is the editing. It's really easy to see how artificially lengthened this scene is. Okay, so they took a shot of the secretary walking down the hallway, making sure you could hear her footsteps. Cut to Jimmy, place a sound effect on top of it, cut back to the secretary walking down the hallway at the exact same spot you left off, and sometimes even further back. To make this illusion work, the secretary needs to have walked a little bit forward. You need to have deleted some of the first shots. I get that they wanted to make the office seem like it's the maximum possible size they can get with the 2 shots that they took, because that's a joke apparently. But that's not how it ends up looking. What it ends up looking like is you let a monkey edit your movie. I'm supposed to be laughing at the scene, but all I can think of is buy a fucking intercom. Anyway, this is Jimmy's secretary. She came in to tell him that Craig did a thing. Anyway, his Craig and his Robin are here, and we have a montage because this movie isn't padded out enough. There's one scene of them playing around in front of a set, 2 scenes of them in golf carts, and then a scene of an increasingly large amount of people watching cartoons in the theater. Also, there is a lizard in this scene. These cool kids seem to like Jimmy because he's able to show them classic cartoons from a studio that's been a joke for the past 30 years. This is so incredibly stupid. Wasn't Robin afraid that she'd be seen as a freak if she liked Apple Day cartoons? Either Apple Day is pathetic and in the toilet, or it's popular. You gotta pick one or the other. Then the voices in Jimmy's head start telling him to skip school.
But
Trust me, nothing is gonna change, okay? Now, if you'll excuse me, my ride's here.
Guys, I know you don't have the budget for an actual helicopter, but was a bigger fan really too much to ask for? It looks like you're blowing Jimmy's hair with a desk fan. Dedicate yourself to the illusion. Now we get to Sonny's big plan for killing Jimmy.
Hit the lights. I will transform Crocco's Funtime Choo Choo Happy Rail Express into Crocco's Funtime Choo Choo Decappy Rail Express. It's a play on words, you get it?
You know, that drawing of your Decappy Rail is pretty good, Sonny. I'm impressed. Did you do it yourself? If so, literally nothing about your story arc makes sense. Yeah, the guy needs to use Synchrovox to make cartoons, but he could draw like that. Just a little tweaking. One fucking rewrite. That is all I am asking for now. That is all I want. You're gonna take a look at the script you shat out in one afternoon and see if you can make it just the tiniest bit better. Say that Sonny got the design from an old Golly cartoon. Without him saying where he got the drawing, I'm forced to assume that he came up with the drawing himself. And because he made that drawing himself, he's clearly technically equipped to handle the job that he was fired from, and the job that I was told that he couldn't do. You ever hear that term, show don't tell? Well, this movie is telling me one thing and then showing me another. Now, Sonny wants to become the head of an animation studio, and he thinks the best way of doing this is to create something that will decapitate a child on live television. My brain hurts. Sonny, you still want a brain? You could take mine. I don't think I'm going to be needing it for the rest of this movie. So the next day, Craig does a thing.
Dude, where have you been? I called you like a million times.
Dude, I've just been really busy, okay? Alright, Tux, where were we?
Were you gonna say something, Craig? Did you forget your line and just try to continue with the scene?
Well, whatever. You want to ride the golf carts?
Actually, I think that he does. So Golly starts to manipulate Jimmy into being an asshole.
Jimmy, they messed up. Tell them.
Guys, I specifically said no falling over. Okay, come back when your hips stop giving out, okay? If you don't shape up, I've got a million jugglers in Belgium just waiting to take your place.
This movie, it doesn't understand, well, it doesn't understand anything, but it really does not understand running gags. Okay, Reanimated, I want you to take a seat right over there, because this is something you really need to understand. So, the joke is that all Belgians are good at juggling. I'm going to say it once for you. All Belgians are good at juggling. Was it funny the first time that I said it? No, it's not, is it? Then it's not going to be funny every other time I say it. In fact, after a while, it's going to start getting annoying. That's how a bad running gag works. 2 times Jimmy just eats a fruit that's made of wax for no fucking reason. And then there's the hidden secret running gag in this movie. You want to know why there are random animals in so many scenes? They're all the pets of this guy here. It took me no less than 3 watches of this movie to make that connection. This is because he only has 2 lines in the entire movie. The only interaction he has with any of the main characters is that he asks Jimmy to watch a snake. He even looks incredibly nondescript. If you're not paying attention, it's pretty easy to assume that the kid holding the animals is a different kid in every scene he's in. It's a joke that could have worked, but they put in so little effort to conveying it to the audience that all anyone watching this movie is going to notice is just that there are random animals in every other scene. If it feels like it's some kind of inside joke, it's because it is a fucking inside joke.
Jimmy, what are you doing? You don't have to yell at them.
She just doesn't understand show business.
You just don't understand show business, okay?
Yeah, well, I understand how you're supposed to treat people.
Like ignoring them until they get the brain of your favorite creator, and then obsessing over them because of this brain thing.
You can make it up to her with a gift. Something that shows how you feel.
Yeah, you mean like a mix CD?
What's that?
Yeah, I'll just burn a bunch of MP3s from my PC into a CD.
Wow, you know that this movie was made in 2006. I share Dolly's confusion. Burning MP3s into a CD? Dude, she probably has an iPhone or a cell phone that can play whatever music she wants nowadays. Actually, did people ever do something like this 10 years ago for other people? Because now, in 2018, it sounds like the most stupid fucking thing possible. Especially in context. You're the president of a studio. Specifically the one that she's a huge fan of. And all you could think of doing is putting your pirated music on like a 50-cent disc that you could buy at Radio Shack.
Radio Shack, America's technology store.
That is some Shakespearean romance. Oh, and hey, we get to another thing about this movie that really does genuinely piss me off. It's been so long. Do you remember all those things that Craig did? I don't know how you couldn't, because there are quite a lot of things that Craig did. Well, the movie itself doesn't remember anything that Craig did, and suddenly decides that Jimmy is the bad guy for not wanting to spend time with Craig, with the asshole that only ever tried to take advantage of Jimmy throughout the entire film. Let me put it this way. Craig did not have a single positive interaction with Jimmy throughout the entire film. Not one. There was not a single time where Jimmy came out better for having associated with Craig. Jimmy's life was constantly made worse, and Craig continually wrote Jimmy off in his vapid pursuit of being popular. And now the movie expects us to feel bad that Jimmy doesn't want to spend time with Craig. Like, this movie was made for kids, so what's that supposed to teach kids? That they should tolerate people's abuse if they're quote-unquote friends? Then again, I suppose this falls into kids' movie logic. You know, kids' movie logic. Having a job is the worst thing that you could possibly do, and it gives every single person license to be disappointed and hate you. It doesn't matter if this job is why Timmy can afford to go to his baseball practice. If you go to that meeting that you'll get fired for if you missed, and you don't instead go to his big game, you're garbage and neglecting him. They say there are 7 deadly sins, but no, according to kids' movies, there's just 1 deadly sin, and that's going to work. I reiterate, this movie is why I hate everything that I hate.
Dude, you're being a crappy friend.
Okay. Craig's plea to continue his friendship. The argument that Craig makes that is supposed to make all of the abuse seem worthwhile is that with Jimmy gone, Craig has no one to hang with. You know, because he has one of the most repulsive personalities ever conceived for a character. Good, Craig. You deserve to have no one to hang with. Maybe you can finally learn something and start to better yourself. The only friend you had was a piece of wood that couldn't stand up to anybody.
What about Logan and Dakotas? Why can't you hang out with them?
Dude, are you gonna make me say it? They don't like me. You're my only friend.
Objection! Even by the loosest definition of friend, you two aren't friends. You constantly berated him, took advantage of him, and pushed him around. And the only reason that this movie gave me for why Jimmy hung around with you is that he was too stupid or pathetic to fight back. The only kind of friend you might have been is Facebook friends. But since this was 2006, Facebook didn't exist. Now, because I am so angry, I'm going to think of a world where Facebook didn't exist to try and calm down. It's a nice thought, to be quite honest.
You're my only friend. You're the only one nice enough to put up with me. Now you're not even nice anymore.
So you knew that you were an asshole all along, huh? It's just like, I accept the fact that I'm an asshole. It's just who I am. It's me. See, this is the kind of rage that a person who knows their flaws and doesn't try to improve them can ignite. The moral of this movie is don't be a Craig. So Sonny gets grounded by the sister because I don't even care at this point. And after all of this, after an hour of Craig being a Craig, Jimmy still decides that he wants to go to Craig's party. However, Golly won't let him because Jimmy's options are to be controlled by the school asshole or to be controlled by the asshole in his mind.
I just wish I could make everybody happy.
You can't, kid. But if you don't do the show, you'll lose everything we've worked for. You'll go back to being a kid people walk all over instead of somebody they look up to and respect. Sure, you might lose a couple friends doing the show, but you'll gain millions of new ones.
Oh goody, another bad moral to add to the pile. This movie really does not know what friends are in any way, shape, or form. Probably not going to sound like the best person for saying this, but there is a difference between fans and friends, and conflating the two will make you go insane. You know friends personally. You interact with them on a near daily basis, and know their likes and dislikes, and generally do things together. In a friendship relationship, there's supposed to be a give and take. When it comes to fans, the relationship is vastly different. People are there for the persona that you put on, and there's a certain quality that they're expecting you to live up to. Fandom is very conditional. And while friendship should be conditional too to some level considering Craig, fandom is a lot more so. You could lose a fandom overnight after one mistake, or if you change to someone else. Friends are supposed to stick with you through that. Conflating the two together is a very destructive message. If you assume that fans and friends are the same thing, for either the fan or the thing that they're a fan of, both parties will inevitably get hurt, and it will be awful. And I know that they made Golly intentionally the antagonist, intentionally saying wrong things. But this is something that's made in passing, and it's really not corrected throughout the entire movie. And considering the movie calls Jimmy and Craig friends, what am I supposed to think? I understand that the movie probably isn't trying to conflate fans and friends, but this is the kind of shit that happens when you do not proofread. You give all these kind of mixed messages, and it comes out awful. It just lingers in the air like a wet fart.
Jimmy! Hey, sorry about storming off before. Why are you wearing a tux?
I don't have time for this right now. I'm late for my television debut.
What? You're not going to Craig's party? He's your best friend.
She's just in denial right now. It must be a great ego trip for her that Milt Appleday's brain is in her brother's best friend. She wants to keep that lame claim to fame.
Why can't you just be happy for me? And who are you anyway? The only reason you ever liked me is because I had Milt's brain.
That's because I didn't know you then.
You know, the whole reason I did this was for you.
And you're still doing it, even though you know it's not going to impress her anymore. Why?
What kind of an Appleday fan are you anyway?
And Jimmy has evolved into a douche, fitting right into the rest of the cast. The kind of person you're supposed to be, I guess. But to their credit, this is a nice dramatic scene. And you know what a nice dramatic scene needs in a terrible kids movie?
Hey, check it out, Robin! I'm in a limo! And it's got all the soda you can drink! Woo! I think I'm gonna hurl!
Yep, Jimmy's dad acting like a jackass. Because, you know, we shouldn't actually feel for these characters. And on top of that, Sonny leaves the house with a pratfall.
Why do you have a cooler?
A man wearing an ominous cape exits the second floor of Jimmy's house with the bedsheet rope. And the question that you decide to ask is, why do you have a cooler? I don't know, maybe he's going to the beach.
What? I mean, I'm gonna chop his head off with my train. Why am I talking?
So that's why you've been following Jimmy, to get your father's brain?
No. He was just following Jimmy because he liked the smell of his cologne. What the fuck have you been smoking?
I have no idea how you discovered my sinister plot, Robin. But unfortunately for you, you did discover it. My sinister plot. The thing that I'm gonna do.
Oh my god, he's gonna suck her blood! And so, this event begins. Apparently it's gonna have a new Golly cartoon. Which is interesting because that's the only thing that we've never seen Jimmy actually do. Making the actual fucking cartoon. Maybe that's because they knew that Itchy and Scratchy had a better quality than Golly Gopher. Of course, because this is going to be an action-packed climax, we need to check in on our other subplots. Yancy discovers that Sonny is gone, and Craig does a thing.
This party's lame.
No way, this party rules! Best ever! Craig's hot!
A very awkward, annoying thing that drags on forever. So, during commercial break, Jimmy starts talking to the voices in his head, while he is literally the center of attention. Then the voices in his head start to get mean and nasty, because, you know, we didn't already hate them enough.
I don't care what you want! I made you who you are! And you're gonna go on TV and make me a big star again! You can't say no to me!
What did you just say?
You can't say no to me. You know it's true.
So finally, Jimmy tries to stand up for himself, while Sonny gets ready to kill him. Gee, I wonder if he's going to succeed in decapitating a child on this movie made for kids. Look, at this point I'm very tired and I just want to wrap things up. Sonny tries to make the train go forward, but Jimmy hops out.
Sonny Alabaster Appleday, you're in big trouble, mister. We're leaving this instant.
I can't leave yet, Yancy. I still have to steal Jimmy's brain with the decapi rail. Oops.
Wait, you're trying to steal my brain?
And the last horse crosses the finish line. It seems like this that make me wonder why Milt's brain was so valuable, considering it took this long for the owner of said brain to figure the simplest of plot points out.
It was the perfect plan. I steal Jimmy's brain and the train runs over Robin, the only person who's on to me.
The plan was to do this on live national television, in one of the biggest amusement parks in the country. You yourself specifically stated that you are going to build the train. Other people on the sets have stated that you were the one who built the train. What the fuck are you talking about?
I can't believe I was so blind. It all makes sense. Your mysterious arrival after Jimmy's accident. Your secret equipment tracking his every move.
I can explain.
But it wasn't until today when I looked into those eyes, those dark, mysterious eyes, that I figured it out. Yancy, it's your mother in disguise!
What?
What?
That's our father! Nearly responsible for 2 deaths and still doesn't give a shit. The shtick's not funny. I can't remember a time when it was funny. I know that The Simpsons did this a lot, but if you look at the earlier episodes, this wasn't relied on too much. In fact, the more that The Simpsons, the show that popularized this trope, used it, the worse that The Simpsons got. Stop doing it! The Dumbass Dad is not funny! It's stupid! It really, really is stupid! Then this happens.
Okay, but you gotta trust me.
Well, Jimmy's officially succumbed to his insanity. He needed to spend the rest of his life in a mental institution. Kept calling everything around him just a shitty Flash cartoon. We tried to tolerate it until he started putting dynamite in the mashed potatoes because he thought it would be funny. And finally Jimmy gets the train, and did Ed Wood build this set? No, seriously. If it's not for the styrofoam blades or the broken fog machine, it's the background that's made with translucent paper flashlights and shoe boxes.
Thanks for saving my life.
You were right. I lost sight of what was important, and I'm sorry.
You know, that dialogue sounds really stupid coming from a guy in a night costume that obviously doesn't fit him. Because this movie doesn't want to end, Sonny sees Jimmy, and Jimmy runs into the abandoned Hall of History instead of, I don't know, finding the authorities, or running to any other place in the park that has people. Jimmy disguises himself as the Milt Appleday robot, but that doesn't work. Instead, he tries to electrocute him again. However, then this scene happens.
Dad, it's me, you little booger. I've missed you so much.
It's quite frankly bizarre. A big surprise in this movie, I know. But seriously, this little gag here could have been cut. I mean, the others find him immediately after, and it probably should have been cut, because it really adds the question of how you're supposed to feel for Sonny. Are they telling me that I should feel sorry for this guy? Even though they've been outright telling me that he was evil and that he tried to decapitate a child? Because if you do ignore the child killings, Sonny could actually be seen as very sympathetic. Let me describe this character before he got to the point of trying to murder children. He tried to continue his father's legacy, and he even had the technical talent if his drawings were any indication. He just didn't have the creativity, and he wanted to do this despite being called a little booger by his father. And on top of that, I guess just to spite Sonny, the executives hid the brain from Sonny while berating him for putting the company in the toilet, something that they could have been avoiding if they just gave Sonny the brain. And hell, if you gave Sonny the brain in the first place, he wouldn't have attempted to murder kids, and Appleday wouldn't be in the toilet. Even if you want to make this the stupidest, most abstract movie in existence, you still need to convince the audience that it would be bad overall for Sonny to have had the brain. And this is why show, don't tell is so important. If you just keep telling me that Sonny is evil but don't actually show it, you get characters like this. Then Yancy delivers a Deus Ex Machina and zaps Sonny out of existence. I know that a lot of people stretch the definitions of Deus Ex Machinas, but this is a quite literal example. During a dinner scene earlier, Yancey said that she had a couple of powers like picking up AM radio waves, but this specific ability wasn't mentioned. It wouldn't be hard for her to mention in an attempt to intimidate Sonny, but no, problem solved pretty much out of nowhere. So, Jimmy finally makes it to Craig's party, and everyone hates him because this movie can't have a good moment.
Craig, I really want you to know that you're my only real friend, too.
Eat me!
Good work, kid, but a CD is just a start. If you really want to win her heart, we need to make a fully animated movie!
But golly, haven't you heard that animation is dead and live action is the wave of the future? What the fuck was this movie? No, I really do want an answer. What in the nine hells was this? Who greenlit this? Who thought that this was a good idea to present to any audience? Never mind, basically it pitched for a change in network direction. This movie was annoying. With everything that Craig did, with their absolute failure at connecting two single points of story, with their complete misunderstanding of comedy. This movie was stupid, with story elements that didn't even come close to making sense, jokes that tried to be random instead of funny. This movie was insanely low budget, with these stupid editing mistakes that even I knew how to avoid. And you know what? I could put up with all that. I could put up with low budget. I could put up with stupid. I could put up with annoying even. But what I can't put up with is a disrespectful movie. And Reanimated is a disrespectful movie. And I'm going to say it, the Emoji Movie respected the medium of animation more than this movie, which is a shame coming from the Cartoon Network. And it is the reason why I consider this the worst thing the Cartoon Network has ever done. The Emoji Movie is also an animated movie made by people who had never watched an animated movie in their lives. But at least the people who made the Emoji Movie saw that animation at least had potential for a profit, which is a potential for something. What was that, Cartoon Network?
You made us Cartoon Network, so you expect to see nothing but animation when you flip CN on your TV. But the times they are a-changing, so don't get left behind.
Yeah, sure. If there's any comedy that CN Real gave, it's looking at their promotions in hindsight. Like the Emoji Movie, this film exudes contempt. It's basically the pilot for CN Real, but instead of talking about how great live action can be, it goes on trying to paint animation as stupid and out of date and illogical. And it goes without saying that this movie has a lot of disrespect for kids too, even though this was aimed at presumably an older audience than most bad kids movies. Like, I'm pretty sure this was aimed at a middle school audience. Craig, for instance, is in middle school. There are a lot of bad messages in this movie that I do take umbrage with. I know that I get a lot of flack for taking morals in kids' media too seriously, but no, this movie is particularly standout bad in that regard. My biggest issue is definitely with the friendship between Craig and Jimmy. I took a lot of umbrage with it in this review, and I do mean a movie aimed at kids should not paint a relationship like that as an earnest friendship. I watched a lot of strangely bad kids' movies. Not just animated ones. These are movies like Imagine That, where Paramount paid Eddie Murphy $65 million to dance around a room making stupid faces. Movies like Spy Kids 4, where you spend the entire time wondering they actually fucking made a Spy Kids 4. And movies like Minions, where the climax is between a minion who turns into a kaiju monster and a villain who turns into a rocket ship. And you're probably wondering, why do I spend my spare time doing this? Because I spend the rest of my time trying to write good stories for kids. And if you want to write something good, you need to examine other pieces of media and see how they stack up. And I have gotten a lot of insight into the common problems that a lot of people neglect when they make kids' movies because they think the kids will buy anything. By far, the most common problem that bad kids' movies have is that they don't put any effort into establishing a consistent world. They just throw randomness on top of the pile that doesn't have any frame of logic, which is really, really sad. Kids need stories with consistent internal worlds. It better helps them understand cause and effect, and it creates much more enriching stories in their lives. It's one of the bare basics of storytelling. And it's really, really sad that so many creators find that so unnecessary when writing for kids.
You do know that people are going to expect you to review those films now.
That would be ironic with the film the Cartoon Network tried to use to move beyond animation.
It's almost like it was planned.
I really, really don't have that much foresight. And besides, would people want me to review shit like, I don't know, this?
They are. We'll have to sing a song she likes.
Please let me pass.
Higher.
And have an aneurysm?
She really hates that.
Yeah, I'm with her.
Seriously, people, pay attention to what your kids are watching. What they put in some of these films is the most bizarre fucking shit that I've ever seen.